So this week, it's all about using a HELOC first position versus second position. Is one always better than the other? And the answer is it depends. Okay, now this one's going to be a little bit more math heavy. I'm not going to go too crazy into it, but here is an actual case study. I got the numbers last week, and the gentleman was curious and wanted to go all HELOC. And I was kind of sitting there in my head as he was giving me these numbers. I'm just like, I don't know if that makes complete sense. I'm going to have to break this down and analyze both ways. So let me bring up, obviously, I scrubbed the individual's information, so you have no idea who this can be, but this is a younger person. They are single, and with their job, they travel a lot. So in terms of the bigger expenses that don't occur on a monthly basis, from a travel budget of only $5,000, that's just because for this individual, because their job, they're traveling so much, they get a per diem, they're getting hotel points, they're getting frequent flyer miles. So from an out-of-pocket expense, a lot of this is covered because of that perk. Okay, so that's why the travel budget's really low. The taxes, this $10,000, I'm just taking this escrow amount and multiplying by 12. So you can see that. Now, this person, their monthly income, this is what actually hits their checking account every month, is quite high. They're doing very, very well, especially for their age. And they do get a bonus once a year. After taxes is around $7,500 a year. I lowered that a little bit just for my analysis, okay? And you can see the guy's running really, really lean. In terms of income to expenses, we've got some nice cash flow here. Now, where this got a little bit tricky is that he did get in trouble in the past in terms of being late on some payments. We can see in terms of the credit card, there's still an outstanding balance, all right, that he's paying down. But let's just say we were able to get a line of credit. We refinance his mortgage, that's at a 4.38%, and we go first position HELOC. Well, what we would do is we're going to eliminate, or we're going to consolidate all of this debt, because in this person's state, they can do 90% loan to value. So we'd have a $360,000 access to cash. This altogether comes out to about $230,000. So we can smush everything together. We can get rid of all of these fixed payments. And really, person's just living here on $1,800 plus whatever the interest is going to be here. So that's why this $1,800 is just these two bottom things. Okay, what he's putting away for retirement in an after-tax account, and then what he's charging on the credit card. It's just $1,800. But this difference, $1,800 versus $3,500, is going to be the amount of interest over the next 12 months that he would be charged for all of this debt. Okay, so that's the $1,700. So from a cash flow perspective, we're going from $2,900 a month up to $3,900 a month if we do this. It's good. We're going in the right direction. But what happens if we do keep the mortgage? Keep the mortgage, we stop the escrow because our loan to value is well under 80%, that we don't have to keep putting money in escrow, and then we consolidate these debts and get rid of those. Well, what happens is the following. If I can bring it over here, this would be great. So this one was first position line of credit. This one is keep the mortgage of $1,125 a month and now get a line of credit in second position. Well, what ends up happening, you can see the dramatic difference in interest using the line of credit. Here it's $1,700 a month. Here it's only $150. And again, the reason why is because we're using smaller balances of debt on the line of credit with the higher interest rate. We're manipulating the debt. So in this case, I would argue it makes more sense to have the mortgage and the line of credit. And you can see it from the cash flow perspective. Here, the net cash flow would be $3,950 versus the $2,900 we started with. And keeping the mortgage, our cash flow goes up. All because we're not subjecting the entire debt to a higher interest rate that can float. So what does this mean in regards to actually being able to get to debt free? Because that's really the question. So let's go to here. Here are the assumptions. The interest rate that we would get is probably around 8.5%. I always use a starting interest rate higher than what it is today. And I always want to try and guard myself in terms of a worst case scenario that the interest rate will continue to increase a 0.25 percentage point every 4 months. Now, this did not help me when the Fed was increasing the interest rates 75 basis points or 0.75%. It seemed like every month in 2022. So no one predicted the worst case, beyond the worst case scenario. All right. But this is still a way for me to hedge my bets. As I mentioned, on average, he's getting a $7,500 bonus each year. I use $7,000. Travel budget, I kind of explained that in terms of, he's getting per diems, things like that. And then we're not doing escrow of $10,000. So here is the 3 numbers I look at. What's the cash flow improvement? What is the reduction in annual expenses? And then we're going to look in terms of the amount of interest they are paying and the number of payments that will be made. So here we said before, if we go all line of credit, refinance from his mortgage into an all first position HELOC, the cash flow does go up $1,000 a month. The annual expenses does shrink a little bit. And the reason in terms of this one-time expense is now that we're paying the real estate taxes in one shot once a year versus doing monthly escrow and putting money aside every month. Okay. So the annual expenses go down a little bit, but here's where we're really looking for. Between all of those payments is 368 payments. The amount of interest he would pay right now is going to be over $115,000. And if we did this all as a first position home equity line of credit, we would go from 23 years just for the mortgage and have everything paid off in 6 years. Really good result. We would also cut the interest by about 1/3. Really good result. This was the only option that was shown. Dang, sign me up. This looks great. But as I mentioned, I wanted to analyze both ways because sometimes it makes sense to go this way and other times it makes sense to go the other way. So let's look at if we keep the mortgage and have a line of credit in second position. This way we can play the game with a smaller debt balance and control the amount of interest that we have to pay. So as I showed on the other screen, the increase in cash flow goes up further. And you can see that here, 1,000 versus 1,400. So the annual increase is $5,000 a year by keeping 2 debts at the same time. The annual expenses drops even further. But now let's get to the big one. How soon could this person be debt-free and how much interest will they pay to get there? So instead of being done in 6 calendar years, we can be done in 5. And the reason why I say total payments is up is because we're paying a mortgage and we're paying on the line of credit. So we have 2 payments per month. And so it's 120 payments 2 payments per month, which means that it's done in 60 months or 5 calendar years. So we're shrinking the amount of time by actually having 2 debts to pay at the same time. But look at the amount of interest difference. We literally cut the interest in more than half because we're not having the entirety of the debt being subject to a higher interest rate. We're keeping the big amount of debt on a fixed interest rate, and we're manipulating a smaller amount of debt on the higher interest rate. Hence, we can control how much interest we actually have to pay. And so we save far more interest, we get it done in less time, and then we can eventually convert over to a first position home equity line of credit once we've got that primary mortgage smushed down. I'm not going to bother you now with all of those numbers because I've kind of done that in previous examples. So it's just one of those you have to be able to analyze and say, one way is not always the right way. You have to take a look and see which way makes more sense for this particular specific situation. And if you want to understand, well, what result would be right for me, type the word results in the comments below.